minutes.
Thanks very much, Cahir. Look, and I know that the Minister's reply will have made it worth our while waiting there. I'm glad to see him here himself, because he is the line Minister on this important policy area. Minister, it's well rehearsed and it's on the record a few times, but I think it's necessary to say it again. You do know my feelings and views that the bioenergy sector in general has been, in my view, the poor relation of the energy renewable sector. It has been the Cinderella of the industry. And I think that is largely due to, I don't know, some sort of disregard for the role it can play in achieving our renewable energy targets and in job creation and displacing CO2 and imports of fossil fuels at department level and within the SEAI. I think there's grounds for saying that, Minister, because for 2 years the Department dragged its heels on even publishing a policy perspective. And while I am now glad that that has finally come about, it has led to certain problems, particularly with regard to the renewable heat incentive, Minister. I welcome this. It's important. It's important for the industry to know what the supports will be and what the infrastructure around the transfer from fossil fuels, oil and gas, towards renewables and towards biomass and bioenergy will be. However, as you're aware, Minister, the start-up date for this scheme is given for at some time in 2016. And this has had the unforeseen consequence of actually impeding the sector, stalling the sector, and bringing about a chilling effect, because, in fact, I can cite numerous large-scale projects, Minister, which have been cancelled or put on hold or are in limbo because the developers are not willing to proceed, not knowing at what stage the incentives, at what stage the RHI will be implemented and on what criteria and what terms. And therefore, Minister, I think that it is in your gift to address this issue and to support the sector by bringing some clarity to the situation, either by bringing forward a date, by actually fixing a date, or even at this juncture pointing out what criteria and what level of standard would be acceptable for the scheme when it is introduced. And therefore people could move along towards the investment planning and the advanced planning for such developments. It's having a negative impact in the sector, Minister, with regard to real job creation in rural Ireland and within the regions, because it has a large contribution to make. In fact, I'm aware of an SEAI report as yet unpublished which cites that there are 5,000 sustainable jobs to be created in the bioenergy sector if it was given its vent and given its head and given the opportunity to grow and prosper. And unfortunately, Minister, many of these companies have relocated across to the UK, where they're light years ahead of us in relation to this. I would like to see us, Minister, being more vigorous, being more committed to the sector. I would like to see a domestic equivalent, Minister, for the RHI scheme. Why should we be subsidising, through the Better Homes scheme, oil and gas furnaces when we should be subsidising bioenergy? Because, as you know, Minister, once families install their boilers and their heating systems, there is a commitment there over a 20-year lifetime of the system to import oil and gas. And that is, again, counterproductive to your objectives in reaching our 2020 renewable targets, in contributing, making our contribution towards addressing climate change, into removing carbon from the system, and indeed to creating sustainable Irish jobs instead of importing fossil fuels. As you're aware, Minister, the commitment in the policy is to replace 200,000 tonnes of oil per year by 2020. Which would be a massive boon to this economy if we were generating that through bioenergy and investing in bioenergy systems. So, Minister, I would like you to intervene in this area. It is within your gift, and I think it would help if clarity was brought to the situation, and it has the absolute added benefit, Minister, of helping you achieve your objectives and targets with regard to 2020 targets on renewable and so on. Thank you.
Tara.
Thank you, Cahirley, and thanks, Senator Whelan, for raising this issue. I welcome the opportunity to address the members of the House on the topic. As the Senator makes reference to Ireland's National Renewable Energy Action Plan, NREAP, and that document states that we aim to meet our overall 16% renewable energy target by 2020 by achieving, as he knows, 40% of electricity demand from renewable sources, 10% from transport and 12% for heat. Energy from biomass, I agree, has a critical role to play in meeting these ambitions for 2020 and beyond. And in fact, provisional figures, it may interest the Senator and the colleagues, provisional figures for 2014, that's last year, show that biomass accounted for 3.6 percentage points of the 8.6 percentage points delivered by renewables. So that's something of the order of 40%. That's in 2014, which is not insignificant. Recognising the potential to significantly develop the bioenergy sector and to address the challenges involved in doing so, I published a draft bioenergy plan last October. Analysis underpinning the draft plan demonstrates that an additional bioenergy-focused measure in the heat sector would represent the most cost-effective means of meeting a number of our policy goals. It is therefore my intention, subject to further government approval and state aid clearance, to introduce a renewable heat incentive in 2016. This will encourage larger heat users to change to systems that produce heat from renewable sources. The scheme is being designed to increase the amount of heat generated from renewable sources, including biomass. There has been no delay in developing the scheme. Work is underway to develop its terms and conditions, the criteria and so on the Senator referred to, including those relating to support tariffs and eligible technologies. These have to be designed appropriately in order to ensure that the objectives of the scheme are met cost effectively. It is hugely important that the scheme provides maximum value for money and minimises costs to the Exchequer. The first of 3 public consultations which are required will be held during the development of the RHI will commence shortly. In the meantime, at Caherly, my officials are also considering the best ways to support continued investment in renewable heating solutions.
Thank you, Minister. The question, Senator?
Yes, please. Thanks very much, Minister. I appreciate that, and it has to be structured properly, and we have to make sure it works properly thereafter. But we're not really trying to reinvent the wheel here. Such schemes already operate in Northern Ireland and in the UK, and we are playing catch-up. So I still would urge you, Minister, that we could put in place interim arrangements, perhaps the EEE register standard, which is already in operation and approved by the SCAI, so that people do not have to wait indefinitely until 2016 before they start into the process of planning and seeking finance to prepare for such installations, because I think there are, as you say, many commercial and industrial operations who would gladly embrace this technology of great benefit in terms of job creation. And also, Minister, we could embark on exemplar projects which would take a good bit of time in the pipeline, such as district heating systems for clusters of buildings where there's hospitals, prisons and schools, such as in Portlaoise. And I think, Minister, that by bringing forward a date or setting out some at least improved clarity, it would be helpful in terms of import substitution, or CO2 targets and in job creation. Thanks, Minister.
What I would just say to the Senator and reassure him again that this scheme will be brought forward as soon as is possible to do so. And we do have to put together relatively complex elements of a new scheme in terms of how exactly we incentivise and we fund it. And we do have to apply for state aid approval in relation to many of these kinds of measures, as the Senator will be aware. But there's been no delay in bringing forward the scheme. But I do want to say to the Senator that I agree and I appreciate his enthusiasm for this sector, and he's raised it here before, and he's right. And it is up to me to ensure that this scheme is brought forward as soon as ever possible, and that is what I will do. But it will be 2016 before we can actually implement the scheme that we're proposing, that we intend putting in place. And I understand and appreciate, have some sympathy with the Senator in relation to his frustration, and where he talks about could we, as it were, give an advance indication of what the criteria would be. But of course, the criteria actually constitute the scheme. So, I mean, we're not in a position to, as it were, introduce a scheme by, as it were, gradually. We've got to actually make sure that it's done properly and that there's proper public consultation in relation to it. But the Senator should be assured, and the House, that there will be no inordinate delay in relation to bringing forward this very important scheme, and that I, in particular, are very committed to it.
Thank you, Minister.